Hi, I'm Steve. I'm an addict. Can you hear me down there? Because in my head it sounds really loud, but I've been told I don't speak that loudly. So I'll try and speak up a bit. Okay. I normally don't think about shares at all when I'm asked to share, but there's been a lot going on recently, and I'm not quite sure what to share and what not. Are there any newcomers here?
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, welcome. Is that you? Welcome. Thank you for being here. Well, I better talk a little bit about drugs. Well, just very briefly, because I'm not going to do a big drug-a-log, but people talk about drug of choice. I used heroin for, well over a quarter of a century, and it certainly wasn't a drug of choice. It was a drug of no choice as far as I was concerned. Once I started, whatever I took, I had no choice. Once I started, I could not stop. From there, well, I always took that, but then I was shown how to wash coke in about 1977, 78. So we started freebasing. Why they called it free, I've got no idea. And uppers, downers, inners and outers, all that stuff. And I loved drugs. Drugs did for me what I couldn't do for myself. They really did. I'm not going to do a big childhood stuff because I haven't got time, but a lot of stuff happened in my childhood. It shouldn't happen to children. They shouldn't see that stuff. They shouldn't be part of that stuff. But I don't believe that's why I'm an addict, but it certainly affected my self-esteem. I was full of shame of not being enough, etc., etc. But anyway, that's for another time. But as I say, I love drugs, but they started stripping me of things quite early on. In the 1960s, it was very hard to lose credibility for using drugs, but I managed that in my profession quite well. And just to fast forward it a bit, where I ended up, I mean, I had a lot of good times. I really had a lot of good times. But once they finished, they finished. But I kept getting into lots and lots of trouble. I'm not a religious person, but I believe in a higher power, and my higher power has got a name. He happens to be called God. But I'm not religious. But there were incidences that happened along the way. I was in Sierra Leone in the 70s, and some stuff happened, and a guy saved me and my girlfriend's life on a couple of occasions. And then I was in LA in a place called Barney's Beanery, where Janis Joplin spent her last night, evidently, so I'm told, where a guy, I was very stroppy, and someone pulled a gun out, and we were being looked after, our little team, we were being looked after by this guy called Sicilian Alex, and he took care of it for me. But I was always getting into those sort of predicaments. Fast forward it a couple of years, and I'm living in a squat overlooking my flat. Everything had gone, and I had to go to France to. I was in the French Alps in the studio, and I just freaked out. I was totally psychotic, and I freaked out, and I was taken to this place called Grasse, where they make perfumes, evidently. Well, I didn't smell too good, but I was very troublesome in this place, and they put me in a straitjacket in a padded cell and left me there for a couple of days to withdraw. And then I was taken to this other place in Nice, where I was strapped to a bed and given what was supposedly sleep treatment for 8 days. And I mean, if you're into bondage, it sounds lovely, but it really wasn't lovely at all. And I came out of there, got beaten up really badly by the gendarme, who I thought I could take on single-handedly. And blah, 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 and on it went. And no matter what happened, I couldn't stop. And in January 1988, my angel appeared. His name's Roger, and he was my best friend in the 70s and part of the 80s. And then he disappeared. And he came round to see me in Hampstead, where I was living, and He said, I want to take you somewhere because I've heard what's been going on and I really want to take you somewhere. Now, he took me to my first 12-step meeting, and had it been anyone else, I wouldn't have gone, but I knew this guy was the real deal. He'd done things. I knew Rog. And he took me to my first meeting. And after 5 days, I did what he did. He told me he cold turkeyed and I could do it. And he gave me so much support. And I did. I just cold turkeyed, got clean, and I was clean for 3 years. But what happened was someone gave me some work after a couple of weeks. And I'm going to move forward now because someone gave me some work and it was pouring with rain, raining like it was today. And I went to their offices in Wandsworth, and I walked in and I said something, am I allowed to swear here? Is this a non-swear? Fucking weather. What dreadful. And this guy who was an ex-merchant banker and he was in AA, he said to me, Stephen, the day is wonderful because you are sober. The weather, however, is rather inclement. And that might not mean a lot, but it meant a lot to me at the time because I've tried to live that sort of idea that no matter what's going on, as long as I'm clean, as long as I'm sober, I've got a chance. On Tuesday, I went to the Royal Free Hospital in Hampstead, which was my hospital of choice, where I used to end up on a pretty regular occasion, to say goodbye. To say goodbye to Roger. And he's got a week or two to live. He's clean. He stayed clean. He's 40 years clean. He sort of knew me a bit and then didn't and then did, and it was just so hard and it was so painful. But then I thought the weather's rather inclement. And last week, a friend of mine, Peter O, who some of you might know from Hong Kong, and we were very close friends, died, clean and sober. And this sounds like a real pity me, but it's not. 4 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with myeloma, which is a non-curable form of cancer, which is treatable, and they give like a prognosis of 5 years. Well, that was 4 years ago. And the side effects of the stem cell transplant and the chemo, it's really, I mean, she's, I knew her as a real strong as an ox, but she's not now. But the miracle is, I mean, she's 30 odd years sober and clean and sober. She doesn't like me to tell people that she used to use drugs, so I won't. But because of this program, I can be there, and it's painful, but I can be there because my history, I'm a different human being to the human being I was because I would have done anything to get my drugs. Anything. Thank God there were some things I didn't have to do, but I would have done. I was prepared. And whenever things got bad, I just upped the dosage. That's what I did. That's what I knew how to do. When the going got tough, I upped the dosage and ran. And being in recovery, it's just taught me to step up to the plate, if you like, and to be there for people. I always thought a friend in need was a pest. And I've learned in recovery that it's such a privilege to be able to reach out to people. I relapsed, and through a very strange set of circumstances, which I haven't got time to go into now, but a really strange set of circumstances. I was organising a run from the Far East, and I ended up in the Far West in a treatment facility. And I hated every day of it, I have to tell you. And but it saved my life. It really did save my life. And CA had been going for a few months. It was in 1992. And CA had been going for a few months, and I didn't like the person that had started it, Alan and Lisa, and I walked into a meeting because I went to this other fellowship and I had a bit of an argument and I thought I was important. So I had a fight and I thought, well, I ain't going back there. And I went to a CA meeting. At the time, there were 2 meetings a week in London, and they were just opening their 3rd meeting that week. And Alan, the reason I didn't like him, I was jealous of him. And Alan welcomed me with open arms. It was just unbelievable. And then I heard the readings, and it just gave me goosebumps. And I have to say that for the first time, because I was always quite nomadic, and for the first time I just felt like I found a home. It was just incredible. And I think I was one of the very few people in CA at that time who wasn't working, didn't have a job. I mean, I was unemployable. And but so they put the helpline in my flat, which was handy. And why do people run out of cocaine in like 3 o'clock in the morning, decide to phone up? But it was amazing, and because I'd been in this other fellowship and I'd been of service in H&I and public information, they said, well, you can do H&I and PI, and they put the 2 together to start with. And it was just incredible, and we opened meetings, we opened meetings in prisons. It was just incredible, and we were a very, very small fellowship. And I have to speak for myself and not others. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I really didn't. I'd like to say they didn't either, but maybe they need to speak for themselves. But it was just very, very exciting. And it's funny because I've not seen this with the names for a long time. And Alan and I opened the Monday night meeting in Chelsea at 6:30 meeting with the names. Alan had seen it done in LA, and he did it, and the place was in uproar, and people didn't like it to start with. But then they grew attached to it. But it has been amazing. If people had asked me in my first year what I wanted from recovery, well, they did. They said, why don't you write it down and put it in an envelope and open it in a year's time? And being an addict, I mean, it would have lasted an hour and I'd been looking at it. There's no way I'm going to wait a year to cease things. But I didn't do it. But I would have sold myself so short. I just couldn't believe it. And when I got clean, when I saw people, I thought, well, it's all right for you. You can do this, but it's not going to work for me. And I was looking for all the differences as to why it wouldn't work for me. And of course, it can work for anyone who wants it. I mean, it was written for a bunch of drunks, let's be fair. It was written for a bunch of drunks. And unfortunately, in my experience, it gets complicated by human beings. Because if it had been difficult, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I really wouldn't. I celebrate, and just the way it is, I celebrated 33 years a couple of weeks ago of sobriety. And I couldn't stay clean for 33 hours. It's just amazing. There's so much I wanted to talk about CA, and I really haven't, have I? But I don't want to ramble on too much. I'm trying to think of something smart to say, and to be honest with you, I ain't got anything smart. It's just incredible, my experience of meeting people and seeing people change. And I think about my life, and recently because of Roger, and I think what I was like back then, and what I'm like today. It's just so different. But I know that if I were to pick up a drug, because I did when I relapsed for a couple of years before going into treatment, in that 20 months I was out there, I did things that I couldn't even believe. You know, instantly, I become this monster once again. I need to just say my first words when I got into the fellowships is gospel truth. Roger took me to this meeting in Hampstead on a Sunday night in a place called Oriel Place. And my first words to someone who said, "Oh, what's your name?" was, "Why don't you fuck off?" Because I was scared. I was really scared because I saw people clean for the first time in my life and I'd run out of excuses. I'd really run out of excuses. And when I relapsed, I made all the excuses in the world as to why I relapsed. And the truth was I didn't have step one. I wasn't working the program. And that was it. That was it. And I wanted to use. I had to cut out all the bullshit because I came out with so many different excuses. But that was why I did it. That was why I did it. Anyway, I had an old friend, another one who's died, Leon Strange, who was in the fellowship in America. And he was a lovely man. He was massive, part of the street gangs in LA. And I heard him finish a share like this. So, there's nothing original about me, and I'm going to nick what he said. And what he said was, you might not like what I've got, but if you're new around or you're struggling, do you like what you've got? This is simple. Just join us on the voyage. Maybe you'll be amazed before it's halfway through. Thank you.
Thank you.